If you enjoy this story, please hit the subscribe button for more inspiring content. Growing up, I was always poor Diane. That's how my Aunt Carol introduced me to her friends. This is my niece, Diane. Poor thing, her family doesn't have much. I was 12 the first time I heard it, standing in my cousin Victoria's massive bedroom that was bigger than the apartment I shared with my mom. Victoria had everything. Designer clothes, the latest gadgets, a car waiting for her 16th birthday. I had thrift store jeans and a flip phone. My mom, Linda, was Aunt Carol's younger sister. Mom worked 2 jobs as a waitress and a hotel housekeeper, barely keeping us afloat after my dad left. Aunt Carol had married Richard Montgomery, a successful real estate developer. They lived in a mansion while we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in the less desirable part of town. Every family gathering was a reminder of the gap between us. My cousins, Victoria and her brother Ethan, would show off their latest purchases while I wore hand-me-downs. Uncle Richard would talk about his business deals while Mom stayed quiet, exhausted from her double shifts. And Aunt Carol would smile sympathetically at me, as if poverty was a terminal illness she was grateful to have avoided. The worst part wasn't the lack of money. It was the pity, the condescension, the way they made me feel like I should be grateful for every scrap of attention they threw my way. When I was 16, Aunt Carol offered to buy me a dress for my school's winter formal. "Something nice," she said, "so you don't feel left out." I wanted to refuse, but Mom encouraged me to accept. "Swallow your pride, Diane. She's trying to help." The dress Aunt Carol bought was beautiful but came with a price. At the formal, she took photos and posted them on social media with a caption, "So happy I could make my niece's night special. Every girl deserves to feel like a princess, even if just for one night." The comments were full of people praising her generosity. No one asked if I wanted to be her charity case. That night, lying in bed in my small room, I made a promise to myself. Someday I wouldn't be poor Diane anymore. Someday I'd be successful enough that they'd have to respect me. I just didn't know how yet. High school ended, and while Victoria went to an expensive private university, I went to community college. I couldn't afford anything else. Mom felt terrible, but I told her it was fine. And honestly, it was. Community college taught me something important. I was just as smart as my wealthy cousins, maybe smarter. I studied business and worked part-time at a tech startup as an administrative assistant. The pay was minimum wage, but I watched everything. How the founders pitched investors, how they built their product, how they scaled their operations. I absorbed it all like a sponge. The company grew rapidly, and after 2 years, they offered me a real position as a junior operations manager. I was 20 years old, making $40,000 a year. More than Mom had ever made. I moved us into a better apartment. Nothing fancy, but it was ours and in a safer neighborhood. I didn't tell my aunt's family about the promotion. Why give them another chance to patronize me? At 22, I transferred to a state university to finish my bachelor's degree. I worked full-time while taking classes at night. It was exhausting, but I was driven by that memory of being poor Diane. By the time I graduated at 24, I'd saved $30,000 and had 3 years of real business experience. Most of my classmates had neither. I got recruited by a mid-sized tech company as an operations director. The salary was $90,000 a year. I was 24 years old and finally making real money. Mom cried when I told her, "You did it, baby. You really did it." But I wasn't satisfied. 90,000 was good, but it wasn't enough to erase years of being looked down upon. I spent the next 3 years learning everything I could about business operations, supply chain management, and scaling companies. I worked with the CEO closely, helping streamline processes that saved the company millions. By 27, I was VP of operations, making $150,000 a year. That's when I started my own consulting firm on the side. I helped small tech companies optimize their operations for a fee. Started slowly, 1 client, then 3, then 10. Within a year, my side business was making as much as my salary. I faced a choice. Stay comfortable with my VP position or take a risk. Chose risk. I quit my job and went full-time with my consulting firm, Montgomery Operations Consulting. Yes, I used my aunt's married name. It was a common enough surname, and I wanted the irony of succeeding under the same name that represented everything I'd been denied. The first year was terrifying. Some months I barely broke even. But I hustled. I worked 18-hour days. I delivered results that made my clients' companies more profitable. Word spread. By year 2, I had 20 clients and hired my first 2 employees. By year 3, I had 40 clients and a team of 12. The business was generating over $2 million in annual revenue. I was 30 years old and finally successful. But I still hadn't told my aunt's family. They thought I was still working some generic office job, struggling to get by. Meanwhile, my cousins' lives had taken interesting turns. Victoria had graduated from her expensive university with a degree in communications and no real job prospects. She'd bounced between marketing jobs, never lasting more than a year anywhere. According to Mom, who still kept in touch with Aunt Carol, Victoria was living at home again at 28, finding herself. Ethan had gone into real estate like his father but lacked Richard's talent for it. He'd made some bad investments and was struggling. Uncle Richard's company had also hit hard times. The real estate market had shifted, and he hadn't adapted quickly enough. He was still wealthy but not as secure as he'd once been. I heard all this through Mom, who heard it through Aunt Carol. The family that had once seemed invincible was showing cracks. I felt a small, petty satisfaction. Then Mom told me something that changed everything. Carol called today. She asked if you were hiring. I looked up from my laptop. What? Mom nodded. Apparently Victoria needs a job, and Carol heard you had some kind of business. She wanted to know if there were any positions available. I laughed. Actually laughed. She wants me to hire Victoria. Mom looked uncomfortable. I know it's awkward, but Carol sounded desperate. Victoria's been unemployed for 6 months. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Tell Aunt Carol to have Victoria send me her resume. I'll consider her like any other applicant. Mom looked relieved. That's generous of you, sweetheart. I wasn't being generous. I was being strategic. A week later, Victoria's resume arrived in my business email. It was mediocre at best. 5 jobs in 6 years, each lasting less than 18 months. Generic descriptions of responsibilities with no quantifiable achievements. Any other applicant with this resume would go straight to the rejection pile. But Victoria wasn't any other applicant. I called her in for an interview. She arrived at my office in downtown wearing an expensive outfit that probably cost more than her rent. My office wasn't huge, but it was professional. Glass walls, modern furniture, a view of the city. Victoria looked around with barely concealed surprise. Diane, this is your company. I smiled from behind my desk. Yes. Please sit down. She sat still looking confused. I didn't realize you were doing so well. Mom never mentioned. I interrupted. Your mother doesn't know much about my business. We don't talk often. That was pointed and Victoria caught it. She shifted uncomfortably. Right. Well, thank you for seeing me. I know my resume might not be the strongest. I held up a hand. Let's be honest, Victoria. Your resume shows a pattern of job hopping and no real accomplishments. Why should I hire you? Her face flushed. I've had bad luck with bosses. The jobs weren't good fits. I leaned back in my chair. Or perhaps you weren't a good fit for the jobs. Tell me, what makes you think you'd be successful here? Victoria struggled through the interview. She had no concrete skills, no specific achievements to point to, and no real understanding of what my company did. But she was family, and I was curious to see how this would play out. I'll be honest with you, Victoria. Based on this interview, I wouldn't normally hire you. However, because you're family, I'm willing to give you a chance. Her face brightened. Really? Oh, thank you, Diane. You won't regret this. I held up a finger. Conditions. You'll start as a junior coordinator. The salary is $45,000 a year. You'll report to my operations manager, Sarah. You'll be expected to work full 40-hour weeks and meet all deadlines. If you can't perform, family or not, you'll be let go. The brightness dimmed a little. 45,000. I was hoping for something more senior. Maybe 55 or 60. I raised an eyebrow. Victoria, you've been unemployed for 6 months and your work history doesn't justify a higher salary. This is a fair offer. Take it or leave it. She took it. She didn't have a choice. Victoria started the following Monday. I watched from my office as she arrived 15 minutes late, clutching an expensive coffee drink, looking annoyed that she had to be there. Sarah, my operations manager, was a no-nonsense woman who'd worked her way up from nothing. She'd been with me since year 1 and knew exactly how I wanted things run. She also had no patience for incompetence or entitlement. This was going to be interesting. Within 2 weeks, I started getting reports from Sarah. Victoria missed another deadline. She blamed the client for not being clear, but the instructions were explicit. Victoria took a 2-hour lunch without asking. When I mentioned it, she said she needed to de-stress. Victoria's work has multiple errors. I had to completely redo her client report. I wasn't surprised. I called Victoria into my office. She came in looking defensive, as if she already knew why she was there. Victoria, we need to discuss your performance. She crossed her arms. Sarah is too demanding. She expects perfection, and I'm still learning the systems. I opened a folder with her work samples. These aren't system issues. These are basic errors. Misspelled client names. Incorrect data. Missed deadlines. This is unacceptable. Victoria's face reddened. I didn't realize you'd be such a harsh boss. I thought working for family would be more understanding. I kept my expression neutral. Working for family means I hold you to the same standards as everyone else. Actually, higher standards, because your performance reflects on me personally. She stood up abruptly. You know what? I think you're enjoying this. Enjoying having power over me for once. I remained seated, calm. If you don't like the job, you're welcome to resign. She stared at me, clearly not expecting that response. Are you serious? I met her eyes. Completely. You're an adult. If this position doesn't work for you, find something that does. Victoria didn't resign. She couldn't afford to. Instead, she complained to her mother. I knew because Aunt Carol called me the next day. Diane, honey, I heard you hired Victoria. That's wonderful. Her tone was overly sweet, the same one she'd used when I was a child and she was about to ask me to give Victoria one of my toys. I did. She's working as a junior coordinator. I kept my voice professional. Aunt Carol continued. Victoria mentioned the job is a bit challenging. She's feeling overwhelmed. I was wondering if maybe you could give her something easier to start with. Just until she gets comfortable. I almost laughed. Aunt Carol, the position Victoria has is entry level. If she can't handle it, she's not qualified for any position at my company. Silence on the other end. Then, that seems harsh, Diane. She's family, I said gently, which is exactly why I need to be fair. If I gave Victoria special treatment, it would be unfair to my other employees who work hard and meet expectations. More silence. Finally, I suppose you're right. It's just, we're going through a difficult time financially. Richard's business isn't doing well, and Victoria really needs this job. This was interesting information. I'm sorry to hear that. But Victoria's job security depends on her performance, not on family sympathy. Aunt Carol's voice cooled. You've changed, Diane. You used to be such a sweet girl. I smiled even though she couldn't see me. I'm still sweet, Aunt Carol. I'm just also successful. Those two things can coexist. After we hung up, I sat back in my chair. The tables had turned so completely it was almost surreal. Victoria lasted another month before I had to have another serious conversation with her. This time, I brought Sarah into the meeting as a witness. Victoria, Your performance hasn't improved. You're consistently late, you miss deadlines, and your work quality is below standard. This is your final warning. Victoria looked between Sarah and me, her expression shifting from defensive to desperate. Diane, please. I'm trying. This job is harder than I expected. Can't you cut me some slack? Sarah interjected. Every other employee manages to meet these same expectations. This isn't about the job being hard. It's about effort. Victoria turned on Sarah. You've had it out for me since day one. You don't like me because I'm Diane's cousin. Cut in sharply. That's enough. Sarah is one of my best managers. If she says your performance is inadequate, I trust her judgment completely. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I can't believe you're treating me this way. After everything my family did for you when you were poor, I held up a hand, my patience finally snapping. Stop. Right there. Let's talk about what your family did for me. They pitied me. They made me feel small. They treated me like a charity case. That's not kindness, Victoria. That's condescension. She looked stunned. That's not fair. We helped you. I interrupted again. You bought me a dress for prom and made sure everyone knew about your generosity. That's not helping. That's using someone else's misfortune to make yourself feel superior. Sarah looked uncomfortable witnessing this family drama, but I needed to say it. I continued. Here's what's going to happen. You have 2 weeks to significantly improve your performance. If you can't, you'll be terminated. Not because you're family, but because you're not meeting the basic requirements of this job. Victoria wiped her tears angrily. You're doing this to punish me. To punish my whole family for being successful when you weren't. I leaned forward. No, Victoria. I'm treating you exactly how any other failing employee would be treated. The fact that you see fairness as punishment tells me everything I need to know about how you were raised. She stormed out of my office. Sarah waited a moment, then said quietly, That was intense. Are you okay? He nodded. I'm fine. How do you think she'll do? Sarah was honest. She'll either quit or force you to fire her. People like Victoria don't suddenly develop work ethic. She was right. Victoria quit 2 days later, sending a brief email. I resign effective immediately. This job wasn't a good fit. I accepted her resignation without comment. Then I waited for the fallout. Came swiftly. Aunt Carol called furious. How could you fire Victoria? Your own cousin. I corrected calmly. I didn't fire her. She quit. And she quit because she couldn't meet basic job expectations. Aunt Carol's voice rose. You humiliated her. She came home crying. I felt a flash of anger. She humiliated herself by being unable to perform a job that 3 other people her age handle perfectly well. Aunt Carol continued her tirade. We took care of you when you had nothing. We bought you clothes, helped your mother, made sure you didn't feel left out. I finally let my own anger show. You made sure I knew I was a charity case. There's a difference between helping someone and making them feel inferior while you do it. He gasped. That's not true. We never. I cut her off. Aunt Carol, every single family gathering, you introduced me as poor Diane. You posted about helping me on social media like I was your pet project. You made my poverty a performance of your generosity. Silence. Then coldly, I see. You've become successful and now you think you're better than us. I laughed without humor. No. I've become successful and I won't let you make me feel less than anymore. There's a difference. She hung up. I sat in my office, shaking slightly. That confrontation had been brewing for 15 years. A week later, I got an email from Ethan, my male cousin. The subject line read, Job opportunity? My finger hovered over the delete button. Then curiosity won. Opened it. Hey Diane, heard you have a successful consulting business. Congrats. I'm looking for new opportunities in business operations. Would love to grab coffee and discuss potential positions. Me know. Ethan, I stared at the email for a long time. Ethan wanted a job too. The same cousin who'd laughed when I wore thrift store clothes to his birthday party. The same one who'd asked if my family was welfare poor or just regular poor. I could have ignored the email. Probably should have. But the irony was too rich to pass up. I replied, "Ethan, happy to meet. How about Thursday at 2 p.m. at my office?" He agreed immediately. Thursday arrived, and Ethan walked into my office looking nervous. He'd aged since I last saw him. A few more pounds, a few less hair. He wore a suit that was expensive but a few years old. "Diane. This place is impressive." He looked around my office with the same surprise Victoria had shown. I gestured to a chair. "Thank you. So, you're interested in a position here?" He nodded eagerly. "Yeah. I've been in real estate, but I'm looking to diversify. Your company seems like a great opportunity." Leaned back. "Tell me about your experience. What makes you qualified for business operations?" Ethan launched into a pitch about his real estate background, his negotiation skills, his understanding of business. It was generic and unconvincing. When he finished, I asked, "What's your actual experience with operations? Supply chain, process optimization, client management?" He faltered. "Well, not directly, but I'm a fast learner." I nodded slowly. "Ethan, let me be direct. Your background is in real estate sales, which is very different from what we do. What specific skills would you bring to my company?" He shifted uncomfortably. "I bring connections. I know people. That has to be worth something." I almost smiled. "Connections are nice, but they don't write reports or manage client relationships or optimize supply chains. Those require specific skills you don't have." Ethan's confident facade cracked. "Look, Diane, I need a job. Dad's company is struggling, and I've burned through most of my savings. I can't go back to real estate right now. Please just give me a chance." There it was. Desperation. The same desperation I'd felt so many times growing up, when I needed something and had to ask for help from people who made me feel small. I could have savored this moment. Could have made him grovel. But I wasn't my aunt and uncle. I was better than that. "Ethan, I'll be honest. You're not qualified for any of our current positions. However, I'm willing to offer you an entry-level coordinator role. Same one Victoria had. $45,000 a year. You'd be learning from the ground up." His face showed shock, then disappointment, then resignation. 45,000. I was making twice that in real estate. Kept my voice neutral. Then go back to real estate. This is what I'm offering. He was quiet for a long moment. "Would I be working under you?" I shook my head. "You'd report to Sarah, my operations manager. I don't directly manage junior staff." He nodded slowly. "Okay. I'll take it." I was surprised. "You will?" He met my eyes, and for the first time I saw something like humility. "I don't have a lot of options right now. And honestly, I probably deserve to start at the bottom after how we treated you growing up." That admission caught me off guard. "Go on." Ethan looked uncomfortable but continued. "I was a jerk to you when we were kids. Made fun of your clothes, your apartment, everything. I thought I was better because my parents had money." He paused. "Turns out money doesn't make you better at anything. It just hides your weaknesses longer." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation. But he seemed genuine. "Why tell me this now?" He laughed bitterly. "Because losing everything gives you perspective. I've spent the last 6 months watching my savings disappear, unable to find work, having to move back home at 30. Now I know what it feels like to be on the other side." I felt an unexpected twinge of sympathy. Not much, but some. "All right. You can start Monday. Same rules as everyone else. No special treatment. You show up on time, do good work, meet expectations, or you're gone." He nodded. "Understood. Thank you, Diane." "Really?" After he left, Sarah came into my office. I couldn't help but overhear. "You hired another cousin." Shrugged. "He seems more humble than Victoria. We'll see if it lasts." Sarah shook her head. You're either very forgiving or setting yourself up for drama. Smiled. Maybe both. Ethan started Monday and, to my surprise, actually showed up on time. He dressed appropriately for an entry-level position. He didn't complain about his small cubicle or his modest salary. The first week, he kept his head down and worked. By the second week, Sarah gave me an update. Ethan's doing fine. Nothing spectacular, but he's meeting deadlines and his work is clean. He asks questions when he's unsure instead of guessing. Honestly, he's already better than Victoria was. I nodded, pleased. Keep monitoring him. Let me know if anything changes. Over the next month, Ethan proved himself to be a competent, if unspectacular, employee. He came in on time, did his work, and didn't cause problems. He was polite to everyone and didn't try to leverage his family connection. During his 1-month review, I called him into my office. You've done well. Sarah has nothing but positive things to say. He looked relieved. Thank you. I'm trying. This job is actually more challenging than I expected, but I'm learning a lot. I leaned forward. Can I ask you something? Why are you really here? Is it just the paycheck, or is there something else? Ethan thought carefully before answering. Honestly, both. I need the money. But also, I needed to prove to myself I could do something without my dad's connections or family money. This is the first time in my life I've had to actually work for someone who doesn't owe my family anything. That was more insight than I'd expected. And how does it feel? He smiled slightly. Humbling. But good. Better than I thought it would. I made a decision. I'm going to move you to a junior analyst position. It's more responsibility but also more pay. $55,000. You'd be working with data analysis and client reports. His eyes widened. Really? After only a month? He nodded. You've proven you can handle responsibility and that you're willing to learn. That's what I value here. Not connections or family names, but actual work ethic. Ethan took the promotion and continued to exceed expectations. Sarah reported that he was one of her most reliable team members. He stayed late when needed, volunteered for difficult projects, and helped train newer employees. 3 months into his employment, we had our annual company dinner. I'd rented out a nice restaurant and invited all 25 of my employees and their partners. As I looked around the room, I felt genuine pride. This company, built from nothing, was now supporting 25 families. Ethan approached me during cocktails hour. Diane, can I talk to you for a minute? We stepped outside onto the restaurant's patio. He looked nervous. I wanted to apologize. Properly. I raised an eyebrow. He took a breath. For how my family treated you. For how I treated you. Growing up we made you feel small because we had more money. That was wrong. Cruel, actually. I waited, letting him continue. Working here, seeing how you treat your employees with respect regardless of their background, watching how hard everyone works because they genuinely like working for you. It's made me realize what real leadership looks like. He paused. My dad runs his company through intimidation and family connections. You built yours through competence and treating people well. You're a better business person than he ever was. I felt my throat tighten unexpectedly. Thank you. That means a lot. Ethan smiled. I'm glad I ended up here. Even if it took losing everything to find my way. After that conversation, something shifted in my perspective. I'd hired my cousins partly out of curiosity, partly for revenge. But watching Ethan actually grow and change, I realized something important. Giving people a chance to be better was more satisfying than simply proving they were wrong. A month later, Uncle Richard called me. Not Aunt Carol. Diane, this is your Uncle Richard. I was hoping we could meet for lunch. I was surprised. We'd barely spoken in years. What's this about? He sighed. I want to talk about business. And family. Please. One lunch. Curiosity won again. Fine. Thursday at noon. Coffee shop on Main Street. He agreed. Thursday arrived and I got there first, ordering coffee and settling into a corner booth. Uncle Richard walked in looking older than I remembered. The confidence he'd always projected was gone, replaced by something tired. He sat down across from me. "Thank you for meeting me." He nodded. "You said you wanted to talk business and family. Pick one." He smiled sadly. "Both are connected. Diane, I'm struggling. My company is failing. I've made bad investments, missed market shifts, and now I'm facing potential bankruptcy." I sipped my coffee, saying nothing. He continued. "Ethan works for you now. He tells me you've been fair with him. More than fair. You promoted him based on merit." Shrug. "He earned it. He works hard and produces good results." Richard looked down. "Carol and I thought you'd hired him and Victoria to humiliate them. To get revenge for how we treated you growing up." I set down my coffee. "Is that what you think I'm doing? Playing some long revenge game?" Richard met my eyes. "Honestly, I don't know. I wouldn't blame you if you were. We were terrible to you and your mother. Made you feel less than because we had more money." This admission was unexpected. "Why are you telling me this?" He sighed heavily. "Because I'm about to lose everything. My business, possibly my house. I'm staring down the same poverty I made you feel ashamed of. And I realize now how cruel that was." I studied his face. He looked genuinely remorseful. "What do you want from me, Uncle Richard?" He hesitated. "Advice. You built a successful business from nothing. I built mine on inherited connections and market luck, and now it's falling apart. I don't know how to save it." I could have gloated. Could have told him it was too late. Could have watched him fall the way he'd watched my mom struggle without offering help. But I wasn't that person. "Tell me about your business. What specifically is failing?" Over the next hour, Richard explained his company's problems. Bad debt, declining market, poor operational efficiency. As he talked, I saw the issues clearly. His business model was outdated. He was operating on old assumptions in a new market. "Uncle Richard, you're running a 1990s company in 2024. That's your core problem." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" I explained how technology had changed commercial real estate, how customer expectations had evolved, how operational efficiency now required modern systems. He listened intently, taking notes like a student. "Can this be fixed?" he asked finally. Considered. "Maybe. It would require major restructuring. New systems. Different approach to clients. Significant changes." He nodded slowly. "Would you be willing to consult? I can't afford your normal rates, but..." I held up a hand. "I'll consult for free. On one condition." He looked wary. "What condition?" I met his eyes. "You acknowledge, publicly and privately, how your family treated mine. You apologize to my mother for years of making her feel inferior. And you treat any future interactions with genuine respect, not condescension." Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "That's fair. More than fair. I'll do it." Over the next 3 months, I spent several hours a week helping restructure Uncle Richard's company. I brought in one of my analysts, Ethan actually, to help implement new systems. We streamlined operations, updated technology, and repositioned the company's market approach. It was hard work, and there were moments Richard resisted change. But he was desperate enough to listen. Slowly, his company stabilized. By month 4, they were showing profit again. Richard called me after reviewing the quarterly reports. "Diane, we're in the black. First time in 18 months. Smiled. "Congratulations. You did the work." He was quiet. "No, you did. You saved my business. After everything we did to you, you still helped me." "Why?" I thought about that question. "Because I'm not you. I don't measure people's worth by their bank account. I don't withhold help because someone once hurt me. I help because I can and because it's right." Richard's voice cracked. "I don't deserve your kindness," I said simply. "Probably not. But I'm giving it anyway." That weekend, Richard and Aunt Carol invited Mom and me to dinner at their house. Not a big family gathering. Just the four of us. Almost said no. But Mom wanted to go, so I agreed. We arrived at the house I'd always felt unwelcome in. Aunt Carol greeted us at the door, looking nervous. Linda, Diane, thank you for coming. We sat in their formal dining room, and for the first few minutes it was awkward. Then Uncle Richard stood up. Before we eat, I need to say something. He looked at my mom. Linda, I'm sorry. Carol and I spent years making you and Diane feel inferior because we had more money. We were cruel, and there's no excuse for it. Mom looked shocked. Aunt Carol added, her voice shaky. We thought we were being generous by helping, but we were really just making ourselves feel superior. That was wrong. Richard turned to me. Diane, you've shown more grace and integrity in the past few months than I've shown in my entire life. You helped save my business when you had every reason to let it fail. I felt tears prick my eyes unexpectedly. I didn't do it for revenge or to prove anything. I did it because you asked for help, and I was capable of giving it. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. Aunt Carol wiped her eyes. Victoria called me yesterday. She got a job at a non-profit. Says she's finally learning what real work feels like. She wanted me to tell you thank you. I raised my eyebrows. Thank me. For what? Carol smiled slightly. For not coddling her. For showing her that family connections don't replace competence. She's doing well there. Actually earning her keep. Richard added. Ethan tells us you're an excellent boss. Fair, challenging but supportive. He's learned more from you in 6 months than I taught him in 10 years of working together. Dinner continued, but it felt different from every other family meal I'd experienced. There was no showing off. No comparing. No condescension. Just family trying to rebuild what had been broken. After dinner, Mom and Aunt Carol went to the kitchen, leaving Richard and me in the living room. He poured 2 glasses of wine and handed me one. I want you to know something, he said. When I was your age, I inherited my father's company. I didn't build anything. I just maintained what was given to me. And I did a terrible job of it. I sipped the wine. You're being too hard on yourself. He shook his head. No, I'm being honest. You built something from nothing. With no help, no safety net, no family connections. That takes courage I've never had. I looked at him. It also takes necessity. I didn't have a choice. It was succeed or stay poor. Richard smiled sadly. There's always a choice. You could have become bitter. Could have given up. Could have spent your life blaming us for your circumstances. Instead, you used it as fuel. He paused. You're more of a Montgomery than I ever was, even though you don't carry the name. That hit me harder than I expected. Thank you, I said quietly. He raised his glass. To Diane. The best of us. We clinked glasses. In the kitchen, I could hear Mom and Aunt Carol laughing about something. It was a sound I'd never heard before. Genuine warm laughter between them. Walking to the kitchen, I saw them cooking together, falling into an easy rhythm. Mom looked happier than I'd seen her in years. Aunt Carol looked relaxed in a way she never had before. On the drive home, Mom was quiet. Finally, she said, I never thought I'd see this day. I glanced at her. What day? She smiled. The day Carol treated me like an equal instead of a charity case. The day Richard showed humility. The day our family felt like family. I reached over and squeezed her hand. You deserve respect, Mom. You always have. She wiped her eyes. I'm so proud of you, baby. Not because you're successful, but because you're kind despite having every reason not to be. That conversation stayed with me for days. I realized that my success wasn't just about proving my family wrong. It was about proving to myself that circumstances don't define character. 6 months after that dinner, my company hit a major milestone. We reached $5 million in annual revenue and expanded to 50 employees. I was featured in a business magazine as one of the city's top young entrepreneurs. The article mentioned that I'd grown up in poverty and built my company from scratch. It talked about my consulting work and how I'd helped save several struggling businesses, including my uncle's. The day the article came out, I got a call from Victoria. We hadn't spoken since she quit. Diane. It's Victoria. I read your article. It was really impressive. I was surprised to hear from her. Thank you. I heard you're doing well at the non-profit. She laughed, but it sounded embarrassed. Yeah, it's hard work, but I'm learning. I wanted to call and apologize for how I acted when I worked for you. You were right about everything. I listened as Victoria continued. I was entitled and lazy. I expected special treatment because we were family. When you held me to the same standards as everyone else, I thought you were being mean. But you were being fair. Pause. Working at the non-profit with people who actually care about the mission instead of just collecting a paycheck showed me what real work looks like. What you tried to teach me. I felt myself softening. I appreciate you saying that, Victoria. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong, she said quietly. I spent my whole life thinking I was better than you because my parents had money. Turns out you were always better than me where it actually counted, in character and work ethic. We talked for another 20 minutes. She told me about her job, about how she was finally finding purpose in work that mattered, about how she'd apologized to her mother for being spoiled and difficult. By the end of the call, I felt something I hadn't expected. Forgiveness. Real genuine forgiveness. A year after hiring Ethan, I promoted him to senior analyst. He'd become one of my most valuable employees, consistently delivering excellent work and mentoring junior staff. During his promotion meeting, he said something that stuck with me. You know what's funny? I used to think success meant having money and status. Now I realize it means building something meaningful and treating people with respect. You taught me that. Smiled. I didn't teach you anything. You learned it by doing the work. He shook his head. No, you taught me by example. By being the person our family should have been all along. 2 years after that fateful Christmas dinner where I'd been poor Diane, I hosted a company anniversary party. I'd invited all my employees, their families, and yes, my extended family too. Uncle Richard and Aunt Carol came, both looking proud rather than condescending. Victoria came with her non-profit colleagues, genuinely happy to celebrate my success. Ethan was there with his girlfriend, laughing with co-workers who'd become friends. Mom stood beside me, watching the party with tears in her eyes. Look at what you built, baby. Not just the business but the relationships, the respect, the family you deserved all along. Hugged her. We built it, Mom. Your sacrifice, your example of working hard without complaining, your dignity in the face of condescension, that's what taught me how to do this. As the party continued, I looked around the room. At employees who respected me because I respected them. At family members who finally saw me as an equal. At a business I'd built from nothing but determination and refusal to accept other people's limitations. Uncle Richard approached, glass in hand. Diane, I want to propose a toast. The room quieted. He raised his glass. To Diane. I used to think she was the poor relative. Turns out she was always the richest person in our family. Rich in character, in determination, in integrity. She didn't just build a successful business. She saved mine and taught my son what real work ethic looks like. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. I'm honored to call her family. And more honored that she still calls me family after everything. Everyone raised their glasses. To Diane. As I looked around the room, I realized something profound. I'd spent years being poor Diane, defined by what I lacked. Now I was just Diane, defined by what I'd built, how I treated people, and the character I'd developed through struggle. The money was nice. The success felt good. But the real victory was standing in a room full of people who respected me not because of what I had, but because of who I was. And that was something my wealthy relatives had never understood until they lost everything and had to rebuild. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't being born with advantages. It's learning to create them yourself. As the party wound down, Ethan pulled me aside. Boss, I have something to tell you. I've been accepted to an MBA program. I'm going to study business operations. I smiled, genuinely happy for him. That's fantastic. When do you start? He looked nervous. In 3 months. Which means I'll need to resign. I'm sorry. I know it's not ideal timing. I shook my head. Don't apologize. This is exactly what should happen. You've learned here, now you're ready for the next step. I'm proud of you. He hugged me unexpectedly. Thank you. For everything. For giving me a chance when you had every reason not to. For teaching me what real success looks like. After he left, I stood on the balcony of the venue, looking out at the city lights. Mom joined me. Thinking about how far you've come. He nodded. Thinking about how it all worked out. If they hadn't treated us the way they did, maybe I wouldn't have been so driven to succeed. Mom squeezed my shoulder. Maybe. Or maybe you were always meant for this, and they just provided the fuel. Smiled. Either way, I'm grateful. Even for the hard parts. She looked at me seriously. You know what your grandmother would say if she could see you now? I thought of my maternal grandmother, who'd passed when I was young. What? Mom's eyes glistened. She'd say, that's my girl. Proving that poverty is temporary but class is permanent. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city below. I thought about the girl I'd been, poor Diane, wearing thrift store clothes and feeling ashamed. And I thought about the woman I'd become, successful, respected, kind. The journey from there to here had been long and painful. But standing here now, with my family finally treating me with respect, my business thriving and my employees happy, I wouldn't change a single moment. Because every struggle had taught me something. Every humiliation had made me stronger. Every moment of being looked down on had shown me exactly who I didn't want to become. I was no longer poor Diane. I was just Diane. And that was more than enough. If this story inspired you to overcome your own obstacles and prove your worth, please hit the subscribe button for more empowering stories. Remember, where you start doesn't determine where you finish. Flexed biceps.